We are recording. We may not, this episode may never see the light of day, but we'll find out. Here we are. Welcome. Hello.
Hello.
All right, let's get into it. You were talking about something about artificial intelligence, and we'll see where that goes from there.
Yes, we're going to solve the problem of AI right here and right now.
Yes.
Um, and the problem I'm talking about specifically is the problem of AI taking all our jobs and leaving us with nothing to do.
Oh, if only it was that simple. If only that was going to happen.
Well, I just thought about it a little bit since that tweet you shared recently. People obviously talk about it along and along. And one question I wanted to ask you, just to hear your thoughts on it, is first off, do you think that uh, meaningful work is essential to human flourishing?
That's a good question. As it stands now, yes. As it stands
Okay.
now, yes. Before the fall, I still think yes, but I don't. Actually, yeah, it would still be the case before the fall. So the only reason that's important is because man was designed to be what he was supposed to be, and then he fell from that state. And like he was supposed to tend a garden. Adam was supposed to tend a garden. I don't know what the plan was for everybody else, but they obviously had plans for them. So yeah, you're supposed to be able to do work, and work is supposed to have meaning. Yes.
Okay. So we'll start with that as premise one that that it is necessary to human flourishing for there to be meaningful work to do. And
Do you want to define work, or is that just sort of a waste of time?
it probably should be defined, but this is all drivel I'm cooking up on the fly. So
Hey,
I didn't do any research,
that's fine.
and so I don't have a great definition at hand ready. All I was really going to say on that point is that um, just based on my hazy memories, I'm reasonably confident that that premise I just threw out there is pretty well attested
Oh
in
yeah.
the philosophical and Christian tradition, and probably others too, I'm sure. Um, but I don't have specific citations and sources laid out for you because I didn't do any research.
That's fine. That's
Um,
how we do it on this show.
yeah. So if we start with that premise, then we can think about this idea that has been put forward that once AI becomes advanced enough, there just won't really be anything left for people to do that AI can't do better. We
Mm.
won't have to grow our own food. We won't have to make anything. We'll just be doing who knows what. Um, let's assume, for the sake of discussion, that that's actually even theoretical.
Okay. Uh, Technical difficulties at the moment. We'll just edit this part out. Oh, you're back. Hello. Hello.
Yes, the internet connection just decided suddenly to drop.
That's fine. We'll
Um,
we'll we'll edit this out in post. Um, so you were saying
sure.
let's go for the sake of argument and assume that this is possible, that AI will be able to do everything for us, including grow our food and etc.
Yes, and I was just saying we already seem to be facing a bit of a problem if that's the case, because if that is possible, then uh, the AI futurists are telling us that we're headed for an outcome where uh, one of the core elements of what it means to be a flourishing human being has just been eliminated. And
Mm,
you have to ask yourself, would God really allow that to happen? That his
probably. I think he
his
probably would.
creation can.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I think he probably would allow it to happen. It doesn't bode well for us, though, but keep going. Yeah.
That his creation suddenly cannot even live as it was meant to anymore.
Hmm. Um, is that can I butt in and talk for a second?
Oh yes, please. I wanted to hear what you thought.
Yeah. So my take on this is so assuming what you're saying is true that we can actually reach this state, that assuming that AI can actually basically do all of our jobs for us, um, that's literally the premise of Star Trek, and it's extremely optimistic. But if that's the direction that Roddenberry had in mind, including in Next Gen. Berman took it a bit further than that, but it was the same idea. Sans all the new crap or whatever is going on with Star Trek nowadays, I don't pay attention to that. But just the original series and then the Berman stuff from whatever 86, 87 through 2004 or something like that. Um, yeah, that whole premise was that automation had succeeded. They had solved faster than light travel, and they had solved matter energy conversion, or energy matter conversion. Actually, it's the other way around with the what do they call it? The things that turns stuff into food. You talk into them and just be like, give me a coffee, and it gives you a coffee and stuff like that. They solved that whole thing. And automation is, AI, LLMs basically is a form of automation. It's the same thing. Plays into that. And the Star Trek premise was basically once you reach a post scarcity state, then people will be self motivated to, do cool stuff. They won't be held back by the things that generally tend to motivate people, like hunger and um, having to work to eat. And that's pretty optimistic. That's actually an understatement. That's very optimistic. I don't think that's how people actually operate. Um, but I also think it's sort of a moot point because I don't think it's ever going to get there. I don't think that's actually how, uh, to use the term progress, I don't think that's how progress actually works. Uh, you know, because the whatever's going to happen with artificial intelligence um, and LLMs going forward, it is going to be a big change, and things are going to be a lot different. And I think the people who dismiss the notion that these things are crazy, that they're just like that they're not a big deal, I think that's completely back. I don't agree with that. That's nuts. Um, these things are showing leaps in programming technology. That's not even the right terminology, but in it's not thinking capacity, but just in their own technical capacity that's way beyond what we could have ever anticipated, even just 5 years ago, much less like 20 years ago. They're doing crazy stuff now. They've been doing crazy stuff actually for 10 years, and a lot of us haven't been paying attention because it hasn't been in fields that have affected any of us. And now it's starting to reach those fields that affect normal people, like generating papers out of thin air and generating images and generating video. That's actually pretty easy to do. The weirder, harder stuff is um, simulating reasoning, because I'm sure I don't have to tell you this, but like AI doesn't really think like a human being does,
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't have a will, it doesn't have a soul, it doesn't have an agent capable of thinking. There's no ghost in the machine. So what it's doing instead is going through basically these probability. It's a massive probability network that is trained to always go in certain kinds of probability modes, and the result is a simulation of thinking. It's giving the veneer, the presentation. That's like you go through. old Tucson in Arizona, and you see all the big buildings standing up where they shot all the westerns back in the day, and it's like there's no there's no building behind the facade. It's just that the AI is just giving you the facade, and then there might be one building that you can go inside of and see inside of. Then, but everything else is just a facade. That's what the AI is doing in terms of its thinking capacity. It's not really thinking things through because it can't understand anything. It's just a machine. But still, the fact it can do this to such a degree of complexity is pretty impressive. Uh, I would say it's pretty cool because abstractly it is pretty cool, except uh, you have people who think that the facade is the substance and is the reality, and then they're going to start to use these tools when they should in places that they shouldn't be used. So if you have old Tucson here in Arizona and you have all these buildings that are just facades, and if you're a filmmaker, then you're going to use that the way it's supposed to be used because it's a film set. But if you're someone who's not a filmmaker and you don't even know what a film is, and you look at these buildings and think, "Oh, I could live here. I could set up shop. I'm just going to live here." It's like that's not the purpose of old Tucson here. It's not. That's not what this is for. AI, the tools that AI are giving people seem to me along the same lines in that respect. They're going to be they're going to they're just going to use it the wrong way. They're just going to use it and assume that I can just replace a real person with AI. And depending on the job, maybe if the job is very simplistic, maybe. But for the most part, they're going to try to replace like critical infrastructure people with AI, and that's going to go really, really poorly for them. But that wasn't really the question that you asked. Now that I think about it, the question that you asked had to do with, you know, can we reach a post-scarcity environment with AI? No, I don't think we can. And then what I was going to reply with was, with technical progress, what we've seen historically, at least for the past 2.5 hundred years, you have these giant leaps in uh, technological capability for for society, like England, America, Europe, with the Industrial Revolution, and then later the more technical revolution post-war, and then the Internet revolution in the 90s. And what you see instead is more people have to work longer hours. Like that's always what ends up being the case. You
Mm.
have with the Industrial Revolution, you had these things that could automate all kinds of stuff, that could create all kinds of cool stuff using these belts and these gears, and harnessing water and wind power and all kinds of other stuff, the steam engine. And the result was just rows upon rows of factories and levitt towns, and people being enslaved to the machines. And post-war, after the peace of if you could call it whatever, I was going to say something that sounded cool, but it was in poor taste. But after the post-war consensus arrived and the Cold War began, you had another sort of revolution in technology, and the space age, the rocket age, the space age. And again, that alleviated some stuff. That was cool, but you still ended up with people kind of working longer hours than they were before to service bigger and more complicated and more powerful machines. And I think you could definitely see, in our lifetimes, because you're basically my age, that's the same thing happened in the .com period and the advent of the internet, the explosion of the internet. I wasn't alive or conscious in any real awareness before the .com boom. I was just a kid, but I remember growing up through that period of time and seeing some of that happen. So with the AI stuff, I don't think it's really going to like the problems of society are not going to go away because LLMs have been created. If anything, it's going to give us more problems to deal with, which is going to make us have to probably, if history is any guide, work longer hours at more complicated jobs. And there's going to be a lot more jobs that are even more useless than they were before. So it's just going to make things more complicated and messy, is my guess.
Sure. So, if previous technological leaps have just led to more people having to work longer,
Yeah.
as you say, then is the AI explosion just going to result in more people having to monitor AI?
Yeah, it could be. That could be one thing. Um, the weird thing about the AI though, it seems it's in a really weird place developmentally right now because I was going to write a piece on this last year and I just got burned out and I didn't do it. But there was a paper that was written in spring of last year. Um, I'd have to I actually have the shoebox of papers here. Might be able to find it. But it was sort of a doomsday paper. Doomsday in the sense he was looking really far out into the future, which really was only about, I think his timeline was like 5 years. Um, oh yeah, Aschenbrenner, Leopold Aschenbrenner, situational awareness, the decade ahead. So he was only looking about 10 years out. I'm not going to get into that too much tonight, just because I haven't touched that paper since summer of last year, and it's already out of date because he was making predictions pretty quickly. But what he was talking about, he was pretty optimistic about the development and growth of AI going forward because he's looking at getting what do they call it, AGI, average, no, artificial general intelligence, basically machines that can think and reason in quotes at a level comparable to your average human being. Getting that out the door within the next like year or two, I think he was saying in that paper. And then from there, he expected to see a revolution towards super intelligence, which is basically like Skynet type computers, happening within 7 or 8 years, really quick. And he said once super intelligence actually gets cracked and we have these machines that can do this type of stuff, then like all bets are off. We don't even know what the future looks like at that point. Um, but he does also a good job of laying out the hurdles in the way of getting to these steps. And one of those hurdles, the biggest hurdle really, is infrastructure and power, chips, materials, and really that, because the people to run these things, I don't think we have a short supply of those. It's the raw materials of getting the chips, getting the GPUs, the CPUs, getting the systems, and then also getting the sheer amount of power you need to run these supercomputer mega complexes, these labs that are developing these machines, these things, and that's really what stands in the way of the kind of AI stuff and all that means. What that really means is they need a lot of money. Now, about a month ago, I was pretty pessimistic about any of that really coming to fruit because last year, sometime in summertime, I want to say, uh, financial capital started to pull out of AI investment for research because investment capital hedge fund guys are, I'm sure they know a lot about investing, but they don't really know a lot about anything they ever invest in. They hire people to tell them things, and that's only as good as the people that they hire. So just like with Bitcoin and the crypto, there was a big crypto spike a couple of years ago. That was because hedge fund guys started to think, hey, crypto's a thing that we can invest in, and where the hedge funds go and the pensions go, and basically the the meat and potatoes of social finance goes, that's where the money is. They invested in crypto. There was a big crypto bubble. Then they all divested from crypto, and the bubble cracked. Bubble crashed. Bubble popped. Well, the same thing happened with AI. The bubble hasn't really popped, but it started to over the summertime, and there was a big financial realignment over summer and fall. And I didn't pay attention to any of that because that's, I don't have money wrapped up in that. I was just paying attention to that because of the AI stuff. But now, what do we have? Just like a week ago, Sam Altman and the guy behind OpenAI, ChatGPT, and the other two dudes that were with him, who's, again, didn't do research. I'm speaking off the cuff here. just secured like $500 billion from the Trump administration to invest in their AI projects. And they're looking, and Sam Altman's going around doing a whole tour to raise money and raise capital for like trillions of dollars proposed projects for this AI thing. So he's already looking outside of just the financial investment, like hedge fund Wall Street racket. He's going to like Dubai and trying to get like the United Arab Emirates, the government, to invest in this type of thing, which means it has a future. Whether that's good or not, I don't know. I'm kind of thinking it's probably not good, but that's the direction that it's going.
Hmm.
I don't know if that
And
answered the question.
I'm
Sorry.
sorry. Go ahead.
Well, no, I don't know if that answered the question. I forgot what the question was.
Well, the question had to do with uh, the question originally had to do with whether human flourishing is possible without doing the kind of work that
Oh yeah,
theoretically AI could take over. Um, but
I
you
think
touched on a lot of related points. Go ahead.
so. For that, to me, that is a question that goes back to uh, you're familiar with the whole like the Marxist utopia, right? The idea that if the Marxist revolution worked out, the they would crack this riddle of why we have to work in order to eat, and then
Yeah,
after the utopia, we'd all just somehow have food for some reason, and then we could just do whatever we
yeah,
want. Yeah, well, that's kind of the same question, right? Except instead of a Marxist revolution, it's going to be AI solving, cracking that riddle, and I think it's a moot point. I don't think we can get there. Um, the hypothetical being that if we could, if that could be cracked, um, yeah, to me it just seems like here's another tool that's going to present to us different problems that we have to work with. Different, it'll solve like most optimistically. I don't want to be like a Luddite too much and just hate on AI. There's a lot of stuff that I'm very leery and skeptical about, but there's also a lot of potential aspects that it could help out with. So most optimistically, AI will solve a lot of problems, but it'll bring with it a lot of problems that will still require people to work, that will still require labor involved. The jobs that will be displaced in the short term, they're just going to be reconfigured somehow. I don't know exactly how that's going to be. Um, I don't. It may not be well. It may be bad, which means maybe that has to be scaled back. Maybe AI is going to have to be balanced against government regulation to protect certain kinds of fields. I don't know, but yeah, I don't think AI can just solve everything. I don't think there's anything that man can make that is going to be a tool that can just solve everything and then nobody has to work anymore. So if there was such a thing, I think I think that would be after the world ended, and it
I
would be
I
a moot
think that
point. Yeah.
I think that's right, and I meant to be suggesting as much with my
Yeah.
made up syllogism that I was gradually proposing. If you because if you do accept the idea that meaningful work, however that is defined precisely, is essential to human flourishing,
Oh yeah.
uh, then you would be envisioning a world in which uh, a large part of the human reason for being just got eliminated, and you're contemplating uh, a global uh, a global emergency of uh, the words are failing me, but I'm
A
essentially
lot of
saying
people
that
with too much time
people,
on their
people,
hands.
yeah, people wouldn't have anything to do.
Yeah.
They wouldn't know what to do with themselves. And if you want to take this in a really dire direction, uh, you could easily see mass suicides just
Oh yeah.
because people don't even see what they're around for anymore.
Well, that's kind of that's kind of something I've been thinking about for a couple of years now. One of the first, not one of the first, but one of the pieces that I wrote on AI a little while ago was on this issue where, like, you had spikes in suicides over the 20th century as a result of, the postmodern condition, and you, that's post talking about postmodernity and postmodernism in general is something that the right is more inclined to talk about nowadays than it was about a decade or two ago. But um, even in the most popular spheres of the right, they tend to just dismiss contemporary studies in philosophy as, like, navel gazing, but it really isn't, because, like, postmodern philosophy is a way to actually analyze what happened in the 20th century with understanding the the, the individual, the person's place in society as society has gotten more mechanized, and mechanized not just because there's more technology and machines around, but mechanized in the sense that it's become more automatic, where, like, where we speak of individuals without talking about persons. When you talk about a person, you assign a name and a face to it. When you talk about an individual, it's just this sort of, a cardboard cutout of a thing. It's a widget of a person, and we just apply rights to a widget of a person and say, well, this just is a stand-in, it's an effigy for everybody else, as opposed to speaking of, like, persons as if they're really human beings. And this is something that's it's a modern phenomenon that is actually, I think, to some extent, modernity exemplified. And with AI, like, what you're talking about with people having nothing to do because AI is taking their reason for being, or the reason for working at least. Uh, we've seen that happen already with a certain kind of automation over the 20th century, and it's what's it called? Alienation. That's the term. Alienation. People have become alienated from existence in the developed world, and a lot of people just sort of dismiss that as being navel gazing, like, it's, they just haven't suffered enough. They haven't worked hard enough. They haven't really done enough. They haven't experienced enough. They're just making up problems and then getting depressed about them. And I really don't think that's the case. I think alienation is a serious problem because it's killing society. And I think you're right. Actually, yeah, AI could bring that about to an even greater degree for the same reasons, because automation to some extent brought it about in the first place. Um, but that's going to be, yeah, that's one of those things where it's like, is that the fault of the tool, or is it the fault of the fact that the society is totally off the rails in the first place and it's wielding a tool it doesn't understand? And I really think that, like, the entire civilization's got to get reoriented somehow. So, you know, yeah, we should limit the tools to, you don't leave razor blades around people who self harm. You don't leave syringes around people who are drug addicts. Like, we probably should limit these things. But at the end of the day, it's still the society itself has got to be reconfigured somehow. I think. I don't know how to do that.
Mhm. I will say that this vision that some people have of AI just taking over everything humans could ever possibly need to do to provide for
Yeah.
their basic material needs, at least. Um, it seems more often than not to hinge on the very common, as you know, materialist assumptions
Mm-hmm.
of the specifically the materialist assumption that the capacities of AI can, in every possible way, equal or surpass those of a human because, in the end, it is said, uh, they're they're identical in the sense that they're both just electrical impulses
Mm.
or some such.
Mm-hmm.
And my question to you is, uh, if if that's not really true, as you and I would say,
Mm.
um, when or at, I'm, I'm trying to formulate the question here, and it may not really connect all that well with what I was just saying, but I suppose what I want to ask you is, can the AI futurists who envision this kind of outcome where the AI is doing all the work and so forth because they think AI is everything a human can be but better, do they have any answer really to the Chinese room, John Cyril's
Mm.
Chinese room,
No,
or they just pointedly ignoring it?
I think they ignore it. Um, yeah, I think they ignore it. Yeah, that's in one of the posts actually. I think it might have been in the post I was thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember you mentioned it.
yeah, that's no, I don't think they really talk about it. I think a lot of people who get really on the development side, really into AI, and maybe I'm wrong on this. I don't know. I have talked to some who are involved in AI personally, like on the dev side, but not that many. Most of the people I've talked to personally, who I know, are like very leery of it. They're either very leery of it or they're uh, actually very impressed and a little scared of it, of how good it simulates human interaction, or human, just stuff it can do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but most of them, if I had to guess, you're talking about secular tech people who
Mm-hmm.
probably don't really put much, you know, uh, they don't really look at the Searle's Chinese room thought experiment as being a problem because it's just to them the mind itself is exactly that is what they probably assume. They don't really think of things in terms of like having rational agents that actually have to do things. That's something they take for granted, but never really it never comes up to the surface. It never affects their how they design these machines. And so when these machines can simulate agency, they just attribute agency to it, even though it's like, well, hang on, are you simulating agency when you're making a decision to get one particular kind of sandwich instead of another to go refill your coffee cup, even though you didn't really need to? You thought, maybe I don't need more coffee. I'll get more anyway. It's like, are you simulating agency by doing that, or are you actually being an agent? And their comeback to that is always, well, is the machine simulating it when it does that? And it's like, dude, yeah, it is. It's a machine. Like, the agent has to come from someplace. Give me a break.
So, for what you just told me, it sounds like uh, the situation hasn't changed all that much in a while. And what I mean by that specifically is, I really don't follow this stuff all that closely. I
Right.
really don't. But from what little I have gleaned, it seems like it's virtually always the case that the people who are pushing this stuff the most are the very ones who who have a faulty anthropology,
Oh yeah,
basically.
yeah. That's my guess.
Um, they they don't understand, or they don't accept the uniqueness of the human constitution and makeup.
Yeah,
Really, just to be concrete and down to earth here, uh, they don't believe in souls.
yeah. Not really. Yeah, I would. That's what I would assume.
So, and that's just a very basic assumption of.
I mean, think about it in this sense too. Sorry to interrupt, but like the AI stuff and the techno futurist um, roadmap is all tied up in the transhuman ideology, the transhumanist beliefs of, which at the beginning, at least, or way back when, boiled down to we'll be able to devise computers complex enough that we can upload our brains to them, upload our minds onto them, and leave these uh, inferior fleshy vessels to live in virtual realities, which is nonsense on its face because it's like, how do you how do you do that? Like that doesn't even make any sense. Um, if you're even if you try to take a a neuro um, a purely like electrochemical portrait of the brain and say we can convert these signals and these chemicals into certain kinds of imitations on a circuit board, it's like you're leaving behind awareness. Where is the awareness?
Mhm.
You know, okay, you can, let's say for the sake of, for, and I know this is a tangent, but let's just say for the sake of argument that you can imitate, you know, a person's brain state on a synthetic machine. Go ahead. That just tells me you've made a robot clone of them. Like you haven't transferred awareness. There's no way to do that. Um,
Right.
and there's no writing on that I've ever encountered that makes sense of this. It's like awareness isn't really part of the picture for a lot of these people. Is it's like, oh well, if you just match the states, then the awareness just suddenly becomes part of the state. It's like that doesn't. Have you ever like looked at your fingers while you type on the keyboard and thought I'm aware of what I'm doing? That doesn't make any sense. So yeah.
Right.
Now I'm not a transhumanist. I'm not inside of that bubble, so I don't know if they would have a. I would hope they would have some kind of argument to that, but I don't know what it is. And also, like yourself, I have done no research going into this, so I'm just speaking off the cuff. But yeah, so with the AI stuff, it's all part of the same thing. This trans, you know, not trans, this you know, techno futurist stuff is it's part of the same gig. It's part of the same gig. That's why they think, you know, if you don't believe, if you don't really take awareness into the picture in that way, and you just think you can model brain states using synthetic parts, then of course you'd believe you could just make artificial persons the same way. Yeah, it's because now you're just making a new brain state that's not modeled after one of somebody who's already alive, like the developer. You're just creating a new brain state, but it's not really a brain state because it doesn't have a brain. But they're they don't really think of it that way. Yeah,
Right. So
faulty anthropology.
your yeah. So your basic conclusion about this transhumanist vision of uploading human brains into computers or something is that they they seem to be missing something crucial in what it means to be human
Yeah.
that you can't really readily transfer. So if that's the case, then my next question is, uh, doesn't it seem likely, if that's true, to also be the case with this idea of the AI will be able to do all the stuff we do just fine, and they're just going to take it all away from us? That might be true for some things,
Yeah, I mean some
but
stuff definitely. Yeah.
I'm just a little bit skeptical that it's true for everything you can think of. And the same question would arise: are you sure that everything that's really human actually made it into this simulacrum you're pointing to over here? That at least to some on some surface level appears to be doing whatever it is we're doing. Are you sure everything made it in there?
What do you mean?
And
That in terms of like the training, like training the models and stuff.
I guess that's what I mean. I guess what I mean to be saying is that I suppose I'm being a bit imprecise. Uh, was
The thing about these
what? Go ahead.
the thing about the AI stuff is that they're not necessarily trying to create artificial humans, right? They're trying to create
Mm-hmm.
artificial intelligences. And the worst part of this is their own imprecision in defining intelligence because, you know, how do you even define intelligence outside of also defining human intelligence? The human intelligence is the only intelligence we really know. Um, like there's other kinds of I guess you could apply certain kinds of intelligence, you know, definitions of intelligence to the behavior of certain animals. Um, you know, but that gets pretty weird pretty quick. Um, but in I guess you know, problem solving capacity, communication ability, which is itself you could define in problem solving terms. Um, that's all they're really trying to do is create better machines that are better at solving problems. Uh, but it's actually kind of funny that you brought this up because I'm I'm working on a review of a book that has a lot to do with AI, and the last section of the book talks about AlphaGo, which was the first machine that beat a ninth dan Go champion, which is a big deal, and that happened in 2016. So Deep Blue beat Kasparov back in 1997, I think, which was the first chess machine to beat a world champion, the world champion. Kasparov is you could say he's pretty good at chess, I guess. But the way that machine worked was a lot different than the way that AlphaGo worked, because chess and Go are very, very different games. Have you played chess and Go? Are you familiar with the games at all?
Chess, I have played. Go, I have not.
Okay. Chess is basically a series of algorithms, and if given enough computational power, it is possible to predict, to basically run every possible game and then just be able to choose what's happening according to that tree that you've generated. More or less, that's how Deep Blue functioned. At least that's what we all assume. That's almost certainly how it functioned back then. You can't do that with Go because you have a 19 by 19 board where you put pieces down on a grid. And it doesn't really function the way chess functions because chess has only so many pieces and those pieces can move. Go, the pieces work by being placed. They can't move once they've been put down. And they only have one piece. It's just a pebble. And so it's the same piece over and over again that you're putting down on the board in different places. And so the board ends up getting more and more populated as you play. Very different game. What made AlphaGo so impressive was that it basically did, like, when you're if you're going to design a program to beat a board game, the like the intuitive way of designing this program is just, well, it's a board game. There are only so many possible games that can be played. So just run the calculations and brute force it and have a computer powerful enough to brute force this such that it can just determine what game is being, like which version of this game is being played, which tree of this game is being played in the act of playing, and then it's just going to beat the human opponent because it can play faster, it can think faster, and it's not going to make a mistake, in theory, anyway. With Go, you can't do that because the sheer amount of computational power you would need is to brute force it that way is just like impossible. It's just not. It's not efficient in the slightest. And actually, I don't know if it's even possible today to do that kind of brute forcing. Maybe it is now, but it certainly wasn't for years. In 2016, they had AlphaGo, which was, I think Google gets the credit, but it's deep thinking, I don't forget. I forget the name of the actual lab or actual group that was part of it, but AlphaGo's programming was completely different. It was looking at games and starting to like think in quotes, like reason in quotes. The way it understood the game, again, understand in quotes because there's no agent that's understanding anything. It was a big leap, very, very big leap. It was a completely different way of working, and it wasn't like a one-off thing. It completely changed how these kinds of AI, game playing AIs functioned. And within a couple of years, it went from being, AlphaGo being specialized only at Go, and then now you have these large language models that, similar to AlphaGo. I think AlphaGo is now like AlphaZero is what it's called now. And it's next generation version of it, and it just you can't. There's no human that can beat it. It can't be beaten by a human being. It's just better, and it's not better because it can, foresee all possible games and just like be ahead of you in a deterministic sense. It's just it plays games in ways that just don't make any rational sense and then wins. That was that was where I was going with this. AlphaGo, they trained AlphaGo on the games that have been played by human players over the past, recorded games, however long games have been recorded on the internet for, which is actually a while, and it's in a lot of games. And set it loose on these champions, and it beat the champions. One of the champions actually did beat a game against it, which is pretty cool, but still lost the tournament of five. And then after that, they went back to the drawing board and pulled all of the human data from it and had it retrain all on its own with no input of like how the games were actually played. And eventually they started training it where they like didn't even give it the rules for games and just sent it out, and it had to learn the rules of the games while it was playing them, and then it would play against itself like over and over and over again. And it just you're talking about these things that are learning rules on their own, basically through its own learning models. And it's like this is really weird stuff. The typical arguments about a machine is just a machine, they still apply, but you have to apply them the right way now, because these things really, people don't know how they work. Their own developers don't understand them, because of just how complex they are. They're very complicated things. So it's pretty cool. I think it's really cool, actually, but very weird, very very weird. So anyway, you take that kind of stuff and you see that you you have these machines that can now just beat games that shouldn't be able to be beaten in a automated way, where it does require like two-dimensional reasoning powers, three-dimensional, like you have to think differently about the board. It's no longer just an automatic, piece goes here, piece goes here, and now I just have to think about whether I want the piece to go here or here or not. Now it's like I have to think about three or four different variables in this board, and these variables are not totally concrete variables. And now these machines can simulate that thinking. That's very impressive. That's well beyond what I thought AI was capable of, and they were doing that back in 2016, and it's only gotten much more sophisticated since. So, no, I don't think they're going to replace every single job in the world. I think you're going to have new jobs as a result, but I don't know what the world is going to look like. It is going to be very different. But that's, again, assuming that infrastructural problems are addressed. Can we get the nuclear power plants that we need to power these stupidly massive mainframes? I don't know.
Well, my own ignorance on the topic makes it more difficult for me to contribute meaningfully. But let let me shift gears
Mm.
just slightly and ask you about the comparable notion that the AIs can just write. Basically, they can be what we would call creative just as well as or better than humans can
Oh yeah,
in the realms of imagination and so forth.
yeah. I doubt that. Um, I doubt that a lot, especially because when you look at what, so you look at the image generation of some of these uh, more popular AIs, whether they're using Stable Diffusion or whatever the other big one is, I forget. But they're they they are generating images based on images that they have crawled and images that they have eaten, basically viewed themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And and the truth is that that's kind of how human creativity works as well. Like you only
Yes.
yeah, if you're a writer, then you're only you do have some innate talent as part of your agency, as part of your person, as part of your soul. But how that talent gets expressed comes really down to what you're feeding it. So if you're a writer, if you have to read a lot. If you're an artist, then you have to look at a lot of artwork, and you have to really think about. And if you're an artist, I think actually it's even easier, because you can see the world and you can see how to make how to make stuff, with your eyes. With writing, it's a constant. You really have to feed it with reading. As an artist, I think just viewing things helps, but also you just still have to feed your artistic drive by like looking at good things, things that will feed your creative drive. Um, but the machines do the same thing because they're fed all of this visual data, but they don't have any talent. They don't have a soul. They don't have that agency behind them. So they just sort of regurgitate them in different ways that ends up being in so many kinds of different ways, and they have to be like forced into or taught, depending on how you think of it, into like regenerating this visual imagery in ways that a particular viewer wants to see, a particular user wants to see. So yeah, I don't think Chat GPT 5, once it hits the market, will be able to write whole books. I don't think they're going to be good books because this is the other thing too. Let's say, let's pretend, let's pretend, James, that you're a machine, that you're one of these boxes, right? And you've suddenly gained consciousness for some reason, but let's pretend that you don't have the consciousness. You're forgetting that you're conscious, and you're just this machine, and you have been fed um, all all of the novels that have ever been written in the last 150 years. Every single one of them. Every single one of them. All of them. Everything that was ever put on a shelf in Barnes and Noble. Everything that every book talker has ever vamped up. Everything. How many of those novels do you think are actually good?
A very small percentage.
So if somebody came to you with a prompt saying, generate for me a novel, and you don't have any particular, like, maybe there's some weighting system going on in your algorithm. Maybe there's some particular weighting system, but not much of one. And that weighting system is going to end up being more calibrated depending on how the prompt is worded and the person who's working with you wants to get a certain kind of novel for you to write. Um, the kind of weight that would be required for you, like what, think about the kind of weight that would be required for you to produce like something that's good, not even something that's of substantial literary merit, just something that's good. Like you're going to be like crawling through dreck, a forget a swamp, it's just going to be an ocean of dreck. So yeah, it's like, okay, so Chat GPT 5 is going to be able to write novels. Look at what it's been fed on. It's going to be, it's one, it's only going to be able to regurgitate and sort of move things around and produce things according to what it's been fed and how it thinks in quotes, of course, how these novels are put together. But there's so much crap. It's not going to produce a literary masterpiece because those are very unique. Like they're unique for a reason. Not everybody can make one. Not everybody can paint the Mona Lisa either. Like it's just how it is. So yeah, I think AI creative efforts are very much more of a you know uh, distillation to a mean, not distillation, squashing to a mean. The it,
Mm.
you ask the AI for a response, and you just get like an average response. It's a mediocre thing.
I'm inclined to agree. And one of the questions that occurred to me while you were describing this scenario is, uh, if I'm the AI, what was I told exactly as to what constitutes a good novel and what doesn't?
Yeah,
What did, what, if anything, did they tell me about that? And were their ideas about that
exactly.
at all
Yeah,
pertinent or true?
yeah. That's an
Um,
exactly good way of thinking too. That's a good question. Yeah,
so that just casts further doubt on the idea of AI suddenly supplanting the human creative drive. And as I say, I'm inclined to agree with you anyhow, but I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on the subject. To reiterate, I'm I have very tenuous and primitive understandings of AI in general, so I just content myself with this bedrock conviction I have, which is that uh, the human spark or the soul, as I said earlier, I just feel compelled to believe that there is enough in it that even if the even if AI can resemble it in a superficial manner, I just tend to think of it as an unbridgeable gap, essentially.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think, but that's in the case of art. In the case of artwork, I think that's going to be because of what art really is and what it's. In my opinion, the only way to sensibly define art. Because if you don't have a good definition of art, then art either ends up being something that nobody has ever actually made, which is obviously wrong, or it ends up becoming anything that anybody can possibly make if they have the right intention behind it, which also I think self-evidently wrong. Um, but if you define art in the sense of like, it should be something that is striving to bring beauty into the world or attract somebody's eye toward beauty, and it is in some sense a form of communication between the person that has made it and the person that is viewing or reading it. Um, and it is something that cannot be altered once it's done. Like if it is altered once it is done and once it is publicly presented, and once it is made, I guess. If it is altered in any sense that past that, then it is changed to the detriment of the reason it was made. For the most part, there might be some exceptions to that, but I can't think of any offhand. So, in other words, it can't
Now,
be interactive.
excuse me. Right. Now, this is a tangent for sure, but that last criterion you just mentioned is highly informative as to your well established viewpoint that I've had occasion to observe more than once, that video games are not art.
Yeah, yeah,
And you just explained why you think that. You just said so, which is that uh, the the possibility of interactivity and player input uh, is is
disqualifies. Yeah,
fundamentally incompatible with uh, the definition of art as you have just given it here.
yeah,
So
that's my opinion.
without going into a tangent on that, I just wanted to observe it because it's something that comes up a lot, and
We
it's
should have
always
a
been of interest to me when you talk about it. I'm sorry.
yeah, we should have a different episode on that because that might be a much longer piece, and we're reaching the top of the hour for this one now, so we'll probably try to land the plane on this one. But yeah, for sure, I don't think I don't think art should be something you can actually. It's something you can interact with in a certain sense, but not in like a player input. Yeah, but we'll leave that for a different time. But the reason I was talking about this in the sense of AI is because, you know, again, in this case, the important part is the communicative aspect. There's an expression. Um, Art is always expressing something. Well, in order to express something, somebody has to be doing the expression. An AI isn't somebody. It's not a person. It's not an agent. It doesn't have something saying I. It doesn't have something actually observing anything. It's not an observer. It's not a witness to anything. So if it's not a witness to anything, then obviously there's no possible way that it can uh, create art, because art is the expression of a witness, and it's an expression of a witness such that it makes the world more beautiful by existing, because it is hopefully enriching the world with its beauty. Now, some artists don't do that, but other artists do that in very convoluted ways in the modern period. But thinking of like Francis Bacon, who was a nutcase. But yeah, I can't just like throw his works in the trash. But it's still one of those things. Like there's still an expression of a witness. That's what you need. And the AI can simulate an expression of something, but it's a simulation because it's not witnessing anything because there's nothing there to witness anything. It's a machine. It's going
Yeah.
through its probability judgments and just figuring you know, running things out. It's a Chinese box. So yeah, I don't think AI is ever going to ever produce art. But then it gets back to your other question earlier, your the whole sort of thrust of what you're asking about, which is, does it matter really if you if you have an entire society of Philistines, does it matter if art ceases being produced because you have nobody that's going to care? And that's a bigger worry where you have
Yeah,
people who don't care.
excuse me. That's what I was just about to ask. Is it seems that a great many people are content with the simulation,
Yeah.
as it were.
Yeah.
They think it's close enough, or some of them may earnestly believe, nope, this is exactly what we're like, nothing more. We did it.
Yeah.
AI did it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the stuff that's kind of scary. And it's there is a place for like, well, I don't know if there's really a place for like AI generated imagery. I guess there is to some extent, but that's only because of like the kind of society that we're working with, where you just need images for stuff, and sometimes it's just easier to go to some AI program and type in give me a clown holding a gun for so I can like have an advertisement for something, and it's like, okay, well, here's a clown holding a gun without all the alarmy stock photo water prints all over it. But I guess there's a place for that, crudely speaking. But nobody's going to confuse that with being a work of art, like that's
Yeah.
just sort of schlock. That's consumer media, as I think I mentioned in my Tolkien post stuff. In
It's slop, that term that took off so
Yeah,
quickly.
slop, exactly. Yeah. So AI is really good at generating that, but a work of art, no way, it can't be done. And if people insist that it can be done, I just until until I hear a good argument, I'm just going to assume that it's like you just don't know what art is. You don't engage with art. You don't really think about it very seriously. You don't really get into it. You don't consider what the point of art is in the first place and why it even exists. If you're going to say that a machine can make it, like, no, give me a break.
The problem, in short, seems to be that uh, diminished human beings uh, seem to think that a diminished tool is uh, is matching human capacity.
Mm,
But
mm-hmm.
when the person who says that is himself diminished, uh, that rather calls the judgment into question.
Yeah, yeah, and also diminished, and someone who's diminished but doesn't even stop to think that maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this isn't the way it's supposed to be. That they don't even stop to think about that, because I think a lot of people probably could uh, come around to thinking, like rethinking their ideas about art if they were really pressed to it, if they really wanted to think about it. But I think a lot of them, I always assume there's some personal motivation for them to just sort of assume like, no, art is not any of these things. It is really just thing that I like or thing that I find pretty, and that's good enough to be art. So it's like, I mean, that is part of it, but it's not really. It doesn't help either that at the other end of the spectrum you have people who also think just as little about art, um, who believe that art should be like challenging social norms and should be shock, and it's just like that's tedious. Like
Yeah.
you guys are just as much a bunch of Philistines as the other group, probably more, honestly, because at least the other group wants things to be look nice and be pretty. That's a lot closer
Mhm.
than creating something just to be a political statement. That's just propaganda. That's not art anymore. But anyway, yeah, that's that. Have we solved the AI conundrum? Do we know how to solve? Have we solved AI?
We we did, and just to show that we solved it, I'll throw in a last question
Okay.
just to show how quickly we can dispatch it. I spent all that time talking about how well the AI can't take over all the jobs because then 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 the part of the human reason for being just collapsed. But
Can
what if I got
AI
it?
can AI work at Panda Express?
Yes, we can
Okay.
only hope so.
Okay.
What if I got it wrong all along? And actually, I should be saying that. Well, don't you see? It has also been taught that highest, the greatest way to live really is the life of contemplation.
Hmm.
Didn't some people teach us that?
Oh
So
yeah.
really, the AI is going to free us all for
The utopia.
deep human contemplation and the pre-beatific vision. I didn't consider that. Now, did I? You wanna throw a comment in there about that?
Yeah, there's only a certain number of people in any given society that are actually cut out to be monks. Um, the majority of human existence has not been lived in monasteries. That's I'm very happy that those people exist, and I greatly admire them. But I would not. I don't think any of my immediate neighbors in my neighborhood are cut out for that existence. I don't think. I've thought I was at one point, but I don't think I am either. Obviously, I'm not. I've got a family. It's like it's just so clearly not. Um, yeah, no, I think that's nuts. I think that's if you subjected that kind of life to all of society by force because they had nothing else to do. Did you ever see the anime Technolize?
I watched the first episode and could not bring myself to go further, but maybe I will someday.
Understandable. It's pretty brutal. Um, it's Technolize is kind of touching on some of the things you're asking about. I haven't seen it in a long time, but yeah, there's a whole thing about the surface world, and they're all ghosts. They're all shades, basically, because they just ran out of things to do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's apocalyptic. It's a very depressing show. If you decide to watch it, just you know, in case the first episode didn't make it clear enough how grueling it was going to be. It was a pretty grueling show, but it was really good. Just very very depressing because it's looking at mankind after everything has been exhausted. Like there's nothing, not even materially. It's just there's nothing left to do. What does the world look like when there's nothing left to do? Um, and in Technolize's case, it's not made by a Christian, so there's no apocalypse. It's just things just sort of run out, and that's that's existential horror, really. So
I knew we could dispatch the question quickly, but it had been something I had thought of along the way, and I just wanted to make sure to stuff it in there at the last minute.
yeah.
Um, I gotta say though, Hibane Renmei was way more up my alley.
Oh yeah, that was great. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was a good. Hibane Renmei was good. Lane, of course, is a classic. I need to rewatch Lane. I haven't seen that in a long time.
I committed a great sin against the mini lane Avies. Uh, I watched a number of episodes and I didn't finish that one either.
Mm.
I didn't have any particular reason for stopping either. I just did not finish.
I would want to watch that again because of its subject matter. Like how much the internet has changed and technology has changed since that was made like 20 years ago. What, 25 years ago now? Almost 30. That was 1996, right?
Yeah, something like
I
that.
think it was the year after Evangelion, so it would be 96 or 97. Um, So yeah, almost 30, like yeah, almost 30 years.
Here
Um,
comes. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I'm curious to see, you know, not like how it aged, but if all the stuff that it's talking about, how that applies to today. Because I'm pretty sure, if I had to guess, probably all of it still applies today. Um, and then there was the fourth one that that same team did that nobody talks about, called Nia Seven Under Seven. It's about an alien that harasses some schoolgirl, and there's a Majestic 12 guy. That was good. That was a weird comedy.
I don't think I've heard of that one.
It's funny. It's really funny. It was based on a manga by the character designer. What's his name? I used to know his name. I forget it now. But the real famous dude. And ah, rest in peace. What was the name of that show they were going to make back in 2007? Um, there was a show that they were all going to make together again, and the director died of an illness.
Oh,
Rest in peace. It looked. They had all the concept art for it. Looked really cool. It was some sort of weird technological, like steampunkish thing. Um, it looked awesome, but yeah, rest in peace. Anyway, not to end on a
I'm I'm
dour note.
I'm out of my depth again, but here comes a sub series for the podcast. We're going to do a let's watch of Serial Experiments Lane.
That could be fun. I have the DVDs somewhere. I'd probably just
Oh, even better, we can do it legally.
with we'll just ignore the FBI warning at the front that says "Do not publicly broadcast." It's fine. The
I'm in a different room.
yeah, the I think I those I would have kept if I did have them. I just don't know where they are. They're in storage somewhere in the basement, but I would probably just stream it just because it'll be in higher definition anyway.
Well, if you say you have the DVDs, I believe you, and I won't force you to get them out of the basement.
Yeah, we could do like a review, like a sort of like a what is it, a book club instead of one of those. You could just do like a lane, lane watch or watch the first four episodes and talk about. I don't know.
It's something to think about.
Yeah, it is. All right, all right. We're gonna. I think we're gonna call it here. What are your last thoughts on AI? Because I talked an awful lot about AI.
My last thoughts are, if I may presume to give advice to whoever's listening, try not to worry about it too much.
Oh yeah,
You know, I get the impression that people who follow it really closely get scared a lot of the time, uh, like really deep existential dread. And if you know, you can call it primitive, simplistic, childish, even, but I I continue to believe that uh, there will always be room for human beings, however and as they were meant to be, because that's what we were made for.
yeah, yeah. No arguments here. Yeah, I think whatever technological revolution is coming, like anything else, it's highly unlikely you'll be able to predict how that's going to affect your personal life, except in certain obvious cases. Um, if you work a stupid email job that doesn't mean anything, you might want to diversify your skill set. Um, but if you work a real job that actually like does stuff and provides real services, and you can say exactly what you do, even if it takes you a whole paragraph, you can actually say what you do. Um, you will be affected, but I think you'll be fine. Hopefully, I don't know. Who knows? I don't know what the future brings, man. Yeah. Anyway, that's that. I think we'll cut it here. Sound good?
Sounds good.